Thieves of Sherwood. The wind howled through the dense woods of Sherwood, a mournful wail that sent chills crawling up the spine of any who dared wander too close after dark. It had been years since the whispers began, dark tales of disappearances, of travelers who never returned from the forest paths, of hooded figures seen lurking in the mist, watching with hungry eyes. Few believed the old legends of Robin Hood, the outlaw who once stole from the rich to give to the poor. That man, they said, had vanished long ago, if he had ever existed at all. But the recent terrors had revived the name, spoken in hushed tones around firelight. Yet now, Robin Hood was not the hero of ballads. He was something else, something far darker. And so, when young William Crane was found at the edge of the forest one morning, his face frozen in terror, throat slashed cleanly from ear to ear, the villagers of Locksley knew it was not the work of mere bandits. The body had been left deliberately, displayed almost on the path that led to Sherwood. No one would speak of it aloud, but all felt the same sinister thought creeping in. Robin Hood had returned. For days, the village fell into a suffocating silence. People bolted their doors at dusk, leaving offerings on their doorsteps, coin, bread, jewelry, hoping to buy themselves a night of peace. But the quiet did not last. A week later, the miller's wife was next. She had ventured into the woods to collect mushrooms, her heart beating hard in her chest, whispering a prayer with every step. When she did not return, her husband gathered a search party. They found her the next morning, hanging from the highest branch of an oak tree, her body bloated, limbs bent at unnatural angles. Carved into the bark beneath her were the words, "Pay what's owed." The village priest, Father Godwin, called for calm, though his own hands trembled as he spoke. He claimed it was the work of demons, not men. But those who knew the old stories believed something more monstrous than mere demons had taken hold of Sherwood. There were those who spoke of seeing the dark figure in the woods, clad in green, a bow slung over his back, a hood masking his face, always watching. Edwin Markham, a woodsman by trade and the son of a knight, could not sit idly by as terror choked the life out of Locksley. He had never believed in the legends of Robin Hood, not until the disappearances began. But now his own wife, Alice, had vanished after venturing into Sherwood to fetch water from a spring. Edwin's heart ached with grief, but it was his fury that drove him into the woods with a blade at his side and vengeance in his heart. The forest was thick with mist that night. The trees seemed to close in, their twisted branches like skeletal fingers reaching for him. Every sound, every snapping twig and rustling leaf felt like a whisper, a threat. Edwin pushed forward, deeper into Sherwood than he had ever gone. His eyes scanned the shadows, his breath shallow, the weight of an unseen presence heavy on his back. Then he saw it. A figure just beyond the trees, tall and cloaked, standing impossibly still. The faint outline of a bow and arrows was visible in the gloom, but what struck Edwin most was the hood, the same dark green, hiding the figure's face in shadow. "Robin Hood," Edwin breathed, gripping his blade tighter. The figure stepped forward, slow and deliberate, his footsteps silent. As he emerged from the mist, Edwin could see the faint glow of something unnatural about him, like a spectre of the night. His face remained hidden, but Edwin felt the malice emanating from him like a stench. There was no trace of the folk hero in this being, only darkness. "You came for her," Edwin said, his voice shaking with a mix of fury and fear. "You took Alice." The figure said nothing, only tilted his head, as if amused by Edwin's accusation. With a roar, Edwin lunged forward, swinging his blade in a wild arc. But the figure moved faster than any man should, evading the strike effortlessly. Before Edwin could react, a pair of hands, cold as the grave, clamped down on his shoulders, dragging him backward. It was another man, hooded like Robin, his grip unbreakable. Then another stepped out of the shadows, another merry man. They were everywhere. Edwin thrashed, trying to break free, but it was futile. Robin Hood, or whatever he had become, finally spoke, his voice a rasp, that sounded like dead leaves scraping over stone. "The forest takes what it's owed." Edwin tried to scream, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of the wind. He felt the cold bite of steel, then nothing. The bodies began to pile up in Loxley and the neighbouring villages, each one more grotesque than the last. Some were found impaled on arrows, others with their throats torn open, their faces frozen in terror. All of them bore the same message, carved into trees, stones, or even their skin: pay what's owed. The villagers were paralyzed with fear, unable to leave, unable to fight. Those brave enough to enter Sherwood were never seen again. The rumors spread like wildfire of a cursed forest, haunted by the ghost of Robin Hood and his twisted band of merry men. No one could explain why, but the disappearances continued. It wasn't until Father Godwin himself vanished that the last shreds of hope were snuffed out. Weeks passed, and Sherwood grew darker, its trees denser, as if the forest itself was alive, hungry. Travelers avoided it, merchants found new routes, and the land surrounding it fell into despair. In the heart of the forest, deep in the ancient gnarled trees, stood an old, crumbling manor. It had once belonged to a nobleman, long since forgotten by time. Now it served as a dark throne for Robin Hood and his merry men, a court of shadows. Inside, the flickering light of torches cast grotesque shapes on the stone walls. Robin sat at the head of a long wooden table, his hood still drawn, his face hidden. Around him sat his merry men, silent and still, their faces pale, eyes hollow, as though drained of life itself. They no longer resembled men, but something far worse: monsters bound to the will of their malevolent leader. Robin's fingers drummed on the table, the rhythmic sound echoing in the otherwise silent hall. In front of him lay a map of Sherwood, marked with names. The names of those still owed, those he had yet to claim. He stood, and the merry men rose with him, their movements stiff, mechanical. Robin walked to the door of the manor, looking out into the night, into the endless stretch of Sherwood. He inhaled deeply, as if savouring the scent of fear that lingered in the air. The hunt was far from over. No one ever saw Edwin again, nor any of those who ventured into the woods in search of loved ones. Sherwood had become a place of death, a cursed domain ruled by the vengeful spirit of Robin Hood. But the terror did not end there. On the outskirts of Sherwood, the villagers of Loxley awoke one morning to find a new message carved into their doors: the bark of trees and the stones along the paths. The debt remains. It was not over. Whatever had taken root in Sherwood was still hungry, still waiting, still hunting. And somewhere, in the heart of the forest, Robin Hood watched and smiled.